Hi everyone, it's Lydia Hartwell with another Castle Creations, and we're here for the second video in our cosplay series.
And I'm Christian, and today we're here to talk to you about sewing. Sewing is the act of putting two objects together using needle and thread. It's one of the oldest art forms that we know of, and basically as soon as we learned how to do it, we started figuring out ways to really creatively decorate it up the ante.
Sewing can be everything from making a garment completely from scratch to just adding embellishments or accessories onto it that make it more your style. So there's different types of sewing depending on what you're trying to do. In the first video, we talked about how a good starting spot is closet cosplay, which is taking something that you already have and then adding your own twist to it with embellishments or changing the shape of it. One of my favorite costumes that I have is Mabel from Gravity Falls. I bought a sweater and a skirt from a thrift store and then hand sewed on the felt letter and rainbow appliques. It also has Christmas lights, so it lights up.
Yay.
Chris did something very similar with her cheetah cosplay from the DC Bombshell series.
I used a blouse that I've had for ages, it's actually for the Renaissance Fair, and I cut it up, made it fit in, cut a v-neck, laced it up, and then I dyed it. Perfect. You can also create a garment from scratch. Using pre-existing patterns will give you an idea of the shapes that you might need to create the garment that you're looking for. It'll also help you build a good mental database for future use. You can get patterns from one of the 4 big pattern-making companies: McCall's, Butterick, Simplicity, and Vogue. These can be found at large retail stores like Joann or from independent sellers. Or you can go completely independent online and find places like Truly Victorian, Cut and Sew, and look around. Many companies offer free patterns.
You also don't have to limit yourself to using a single pattern for your garment. Maybe you like the top from this one, but the bottom from another pattern. With a little bit of creativity, you can put them together. You can also make adjustments to the pattern, such as adding a collar, making the sleeves long, or even moving some of the seams around. That's starting to get into our next topic, which is drafting your own pattern. Sometimes you can't find a pattern that meets all of your needs, so what you'll need to do is make your own. This process is called drafting.
Drafting your own pattern can be really, really difficult. But in some cases, it's actually the easiest way to go about making a project. One of these projects is a circle skirt. A circle skirt is made by taking your waist measurement and cutting out a giant circular piece of fabric. These kind of skirts are super twirly.
This is where some math can come in, because you'll need to know pi, circumference, all that. Or you can go online and find a circle skirt calculator. You put in your measurements, and it'll tell you the dimensions that you need to cut out. I personally like using the one on moodfabric.com.
For this tutorial you will need fabric, sewing scissors, pens for marking, measuring tape or ruler, wideband elastic, sewing pins, thread. Hi all, this is Chris Jade, and I'm here to walk you through making your very own circle skirt. Once you've calculated your waist radius and desired skirt length, you're ready to draw your pattern onto the fabric. You'll need pens, scissors, marker, or chalk, and a ruler or measuring tape for this part. Fold your fabric in half, lengthwise, with the fold at the top of your working area. Pin to keep it from shifting. From the top corner along the fold, measure out your waist radius and mark it. Do the same from the top corner down. Now using a ruler, measuring tape, or protractor, mark the radius length in a semicircle from one edge of the fabric to the other. Double check your measurements. Now, from the end point of your radius markings on the folded edge, mark your desired skirt length. I'm using 14 inches. Do the same on the raw edge side. Using the same technique to draw your radius out, draw out the curve of your skirt. You can now connect your markings to make them easier to see. We won't see these once the skirt is sewn. Cut out the bottom of your skirt along the markings, and then cut out the radius. You'll do this entire process twice to make the 2 panels for the skirt, but you can use the first skirt panel as a guide for cutting the second. Here's our panel. Now, using the remainder of your fabric, we're going to cut a waistband. You'll need your tape measure and or ruler, scissors, and something to mark the fabric with. To make an easy slip-on skirt, you're going to want to make your waistband about 1.5 times the size of your waist. The waistband is for 26 inches here, so I'm going to cut the band to about 40 inches. I want a very wide band, so I've measured the width to 14 inches. You'll then have 2 strips of 20-inch by 14-inch fabric cut out. With the right sides together, pin the short edge of one end together. Your waistband side seam is now ready to sew, but first, we're going to sew together the 2 skirt panels. Bring your skirt panels together, matching the top and bottom side seams with right sides together. That's the right side of the fabric. Starting at the top, pin the side seams. Now we're ready to sew the panels together. You're using a 5/8 inch seam allowance here, so make sure your fabric is lined up at the 5/8 inch line on your machine, then sew a straight stitch. Repeat for both seams. Then we're going to carefully trim the edges of the side seams so there's less bulk. Be careful not to trim your sewn seam. This next part is optional. If your sewing machine has a finishing zigzag stitch and special foot, you can use it to slightly tuck under and sew across the edge of your seam. This leaves a nice professional looking finished edge. This is known as overlocking. If you have access to a serger, you can also use it to finish edges. This next step is optional if you've overlocked your unfinished hem. To hem the skirt, we'll simply turn over 5/8 inch of the edge on the underside of the skirt and sew it down with a straight stitch. If you're a more experienced sewer, you can do this without pinning. Otherwise, it may be wise to pin the edge down beforehand. Your skirt's now hemmed. You can iron this down to make it neater. Now to finish our waistband. We're simply going to stitch up the edge we pinned earlier. Then we'll fold the waistband in half widthwise and iron it down. Now, open the fold back up. Lay the short edges, right sides of fabric together, pin, and stitch again. Fold back on the iron edges, and you've now made a continuous band which you can slip your elastic into. To make your elastic the correct size, simply wrap it around your waist with about a 2-inch overlap. We're going to stitch this into a continuous circle. Overlap the elastic a couple inches and sew it down very securely. The next part can be a bit tricky if your waistband is as wide as mine is. You're going to slip the elastic band so it nestles inside of the waistband at the folded over top that you ironed. You can place a few pins along the way to keep it secure. Now we're going to very carefully attach our skirt to our waistband. The fuller your skirt, the more difficult this will be. Our skirt is more than twice the size of our waistband, so we're going to have to distribute that fabric. There's 2 methods to do this. pleating, and gathering. I'm going to make pleats for my skirt, but I'll show you the gathering option later as well. To pleat, you're simply going to fold the top of the skirt fabric over onto itself. These are simple knife pleats. I'm putting a pleat at each side seam, and some between. You can adjust your pleats, and where they are, as you go along to make the skirt properly fit into the waistband with no extra fabric. Then, with right sides together, and the waistband raw edge matching your skirt raw edge, pin the skirt to the waistband. Careful not to pick yourself with a pin. Now, stitch the pinned waistband and skirt together, removing pins as you go. Be sure to remove all the pins before you try it on for a final fit. Trim down the waist seam, add a finishing stitch, or leave it as is. Now give your skirt a quick iron and ta-da! That's it! You've made your very own circle skirt. The other option for easing the fullness of your skirt is gathering. To do this, you'll need a hand sewing needle and thread. I like to use a contrasting thread so you can easily see it. Then you're going to sew a simple, wide running stitch along the top edge of your fabric. Don't worry about it being pretty or even. You're not going to see any of this once you sew it to the waistband. You'll want to make a few separate sections so you're not working with super long pieces of thread. Once finished, simply take the long edge of your thread and pull. This will gather your fabric to your desired size.
So that's a quick demonstration of drafting your own pattern and sewing up a circle skirt.
Thank you so much to the KC Library for having us. Be sure to ask your librarian for any resources you may need pertaining to sewing. And also, it's a great idea to check out YouTube. The tutorials there are fantastic and really help you when you're in a rut.
Thanks again so much for watching, guys. Make sure to tell us down below what some of your favorite sewing projects are. We can't wait to show you our next video. Bye!
Bye! Thanks! Bye-bye! That train has left the station.